Welcome to the Thoughtful Software Podcast. Innovate and thrive with thoughtful software. This podcast is all about helping technology leaders simplify innovation, build emerging tech, and confidently fuel digital initiatives. Join Andrew and Fahad Shokat as they discuss how to navigate the ever-changing software landscape. Keep it simple, focus on people, and consistently deliver value.
So our mission has always been and always be to transform the world through thoughtful software. And the dumpster fire that was 2020 is a year that no one will ever forget. COVID, there's the election, but what about tech? So today we're going to kind of look back and discuss just a few things of what happened in tech in 2020, what went right, what went wrong. We'll also look ahead to 2021 and see what's coming up. So Andrew, from your viewpoint, what advances were made in technology to be more thoughtful and to do things a little bit better?
I don't know about thoughtfulness. We'll get to that, I think, in the middle of this answer. I mean, one major advancement was in the pharmaceutical area. The amount of testing and simulation and machine learning and things that go into making, to be honest, the fastest vaccine in human history is incredible. And I think the learnings you're going to see from that is going to be monstrous, not just in the life sciences field, but across every industry, right? It's going to be felt. People are going to really see that we took a process that took 5 to 6 years before and put it down to 9 months.
Was that because of technology and data?
Absolutely. Data, technology. When you look at mRNA and those types of vaccines, they're based on genetic sequencing and stuff. Well, sequencing naturally fits itself towards data science. This is a purely data science, breaking apart the virus, discovering what the virus looks like. That was all computing based, and computing accelerated that. And because of that, I think businesses that aren't in the life sciences space are going to look at that and say, how can we apply the same thinking, the same gains that they got, taking a 6-year process down to 9 months, and apply it to our vertical? And I think when people start thinking about that, you're going to see a massive acceleration in investment to gain a competitive advantage through, digital technologies, and it's going to be a massive accelerant on the fire that is already eating the world, software. So, what thoughtfulness I've seen put into it? I think in a way, people really rediscovered some of their humanity. As weird as that sounds, 2020 really brought out the humans in all of us. The fact that we're social creatures and how much we missed going and visiting our friends in different cities, or going to restaurants, or getting our hair cut, and how human we all are. I think this brought us together in that shared suffering. And I think that as we regain some of our humanity, people start looking at some of the more inhumane software practices like Facebook, and how people are looking at that, and spent more time looking at their privacy being eroded. And you're seeing that become more and more important. And so I think we didn't do anything more thoughtful this year, but I think we're rediscovering what technology can do and what it actually means for people. And in that, I think we've started the journey towards more thoughtful software as a population, as we realize the impact it has in all of our lives. And I'll give you a couple examples of this. Before, I had got my groceries delivered in Seattle when I first moved there. For the first month or so, I didn't know the city. So Amazon had their Amazon Fresh, and then Safeway had a grocery delivery service. And so I had used those to get groceries delivered to my house, and it was awesome. But I like to pick my produce and everything, so I ended up going back to the store. It was paramount to do that during this pandemic, and most people didn't view that as a critical service. But now Instacart is this massive $100 billion company, and for good reason. It's a critical service that people need. I think another thing that people didn't think about before was access to going out, and how much people relied on having other people make them meals. So things like Instacart and logistics, or not Instacart, but DoorDash and logistics apps like that help people do that. I think in a way, we've all gotten more accustomed to technology than we've ever been in the past, more reliant on it. Not just at work with Zoom, Slack, Teams, Office 365 and collaboration software, but you can't escape it anymore. And I think we've hit a precipice where I don't think people are going to be able to turn back. And much more of our experiences throughout life will be digital. And between the more connectedness, that more human aspects of ourselves being rediscovered, and that pervasive technology edge, we're going to see those two meet. And that's when I think thoughtful software will become even more critical as we experience lives more digitally.
In the pharmaceutical example for the vaccine specifically, to get it out so fast, do you know underlying the technology that was it something that was in place before? I mean, obviously, machine learning and statistics has been around for a while. Did they use something that was accelerated because of the need to do something so fast, or was some of the technology already in place and they just leveraged what we already knew?
I think it's an 80-20 problem. I think a lot of the best organizations had already had some of this in place and they knew they had needed it. I mean, mRNA vaccines have been researched for years. So a lot of this stuff that I talked about had been being used prior to COVID. I think the 20% of it definitely accelerated it. I think how to accelerate trials and all of that stuff, I'm pretty sure if you look at the investment here, people invested probably millions of dollars in new technology to accelerate the process. So probably 80-20. But I think that's true for almost every kind of situation like this happening. When the technology's in place, you can see the effects of what's having. When it's not, you can feel it in the bottom line and how much slower your organization moves when it's critical.
Talk about Pfizer for a minute. Like, what did they do years ago in their like architecture and their analysis and their internal, just process to be able to accelerate and do such a successful job from what we can see so far? Like, what decisions do you know of that they made that paid off very, very well for them this year in a case like this?
I think there's a couple things. So if you look, they have a venture capital arm, Pfizer Ventures. A lot of big companies do, but they've made a lot of key investments, and so I think that their fund is over $600 million, and they continue to invest in therapeutics and technology from that. And I think that that gives them a key insight into different companies that can help them excel in different technologies. And I think that's key for these companies to keep an eye and pulse on the industry as it evolves. I also think that they're constantly looking at how they collect data from patient care and different sections of the life science life cycle, if you will. And because they're collecting all this data, I think that they may not know what to do with it yet, but this helps them do comparisons and train models and things like that down the road. And they did that earlier, I'm pretty sure, than everyone else. And then if I had to put another thing down here, I think the way they look at partnerships and the people they partner with, these smaller companies, and I forget exactly who they partner with for this vaccine. They're constantly looking at smaller people who can move faster, but they leverage the thing Pfizer does really well, which is logistics and manufacturing and all of that. And so they're able to get the gains of having a smaller creative team build these kind of things and then leverage the huge network and power that Pfizer has. And between those three things, the investment in data, the keeping their ear to the ground and in the industry for smaller businesses, and the partnership, I think it's really huge. And it can't be understated that they know that they may not be as innovative as a 30-person company, but they know that they can get in there and partner with them and create outsized results for everybody. And it's evident that we're first in market in the United States, and continue to excel.
Yeah, I mean, the Pfizer example is probably one of the most powerful examples of, if you're not looking at data and thinking about data. I mean, I'm not sure what else to tell you. And so if you're like a CIO or CTO and you're seeing this, really powerful example of building the right architecture, using data for, the right causes and like basically setting yourself up so that you can make these decisions. And you know that in 2020, everything is just being tremendously accelerated, or, people are being very cautious. What would you recommend to them on how they can start thinking about like a master data or a, more of a total comprehensive platform to make these types of decisions later on?
Yeah, so let's look at the Pfizer example because we can continue with that. So in January 2020, they launched a center of excellence for vaccine research, right? They wanted to be better than everyone else in both collaboration and working to create vaccines, right? And they have digital research hubs around the world to continue to do this. And they're really leveraging again that data thing that they were doing. I mentioned previously, and I mean they have tons of stories like this. They have a blockchain excellence center of excellence, and they keep investing in these quote centers of excellence in such a terrible enterprisey way of saying, hey, we're going to try to be really good at this, and we're going to try to be really good at this piece of technology. And they're not relying on just internal people to do it for them. They're looking at vendors to partner with. They're looking at external people that know and can see the broader market and how these technologies are leveraged. And I also think that there's also, I talk about these centers of excellence. They sound like huge investments, and in some cases they are, but you don't have to have these huge investments. You can look at a small problem and start small, fixing things one at a time, and not have to start with this huge digital transformation. We talk about this all the time. Everyone wants a center of excellence blockchain, put $1 billion behind it, and have a rodeo. But I don't think that that's the best way to do things. It's so risky. It's so anti-tech. When you think about these startups, they outcompete these juggernauts because they move quicker, because they're focused on that one thing, and they're able to get it through with much less money, much less manpower, because they're focusing and they're really trying to do this one thing really well.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And so let's touch on the second point you made around privacy. And I think one of the things that really did go very well was Apple and their continuing effort to like double, triple down on privacy and making changes to their like ad platforms and how ads are served up to individuals. And you see like companies like Facebook trying to fight back hilariously. And I think we're taking notice that this is really important. Did you see any like advancements in how people are or companies are structuring data or looking at data or ingesting data that has a privacy first kind of thought to it, as opposed to just let's just build whatever we want to build?
I think that privacy is incredibly important. I think what Apple's doing to Facebook is hilarious, and Facebook's attacking them as some of the greatest advertising for iPhones on the planet. I don't think they realize that no one really likes them. I I think we have a duty to our fellow people, and while it doesn't seem so obvious today, and maybe it will never be obvious for developers, but in a lot of ways, we don't have to take a Hippocratic oath or an oath to the Constitution or the law of our land. We can just become developers, and we can just get out there and change lives, right? For the better and for the worse. And because we don't have to do that, because we're not doctors, because we're not lawyers, although we certainly almost make as much as they do now, I think we almost have to put something in place there, right? Where some sort of oath is taken by developers to look out for humanity, right? The Hippocratic oath of do no harm, swearing on the Bible that you're going to uphold the laws of the land and do it to the best of your ability, like the bar and being barred as I just, privacy is one aspect of something much larger and much more pervasive. Ethics and AI, data biases These are things that developers have to deal with every day that we have no oversight over. Nobody cares. And yeah, there's GDPR, but the developers don't have to worry about that. That's a business fine, right? Developers are free to get in there and lie about emissions, and engineers too, about emissions on vehicles and things like that that cause people to die when a plane crashes. And I think about that and I just wonder when the accountability is going to come. That we might have the most important jobs in the world just with the outsized impact we have, right? A doctor that's corrupt might kill 5 people before they go to jail. A lawyer might have 3 or 4 bad cases before they're disbarred. But a developer could accidentally fire a missile or crash a plane or deploy code into cars that kill tens of thousands of people. And they don't have to do anything close to the amount of training, the amount of certification, the amount of continued education that a person has to do. And I'm not saying all software is that serious. Like some stuff's just fucking project management software and no one's going to die if your Asana goes down. But on the people working on legitimately human-facing applications, things that have privacy or ethics or other aspects to it, I think we have to really start asking our question of who gets to work on these, what are the qualifications required to do it, and should we allow people to do it if they're not aware of privacy being a concern? As you say, just build it, whatever. Should we allow people from boot camps or computer science degrees, or does that qualify you to do it? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to it, but I think definitely in our lifetimes, we're going to see this as a field wholly transform as a form of maturity, but also I think maybe some short-term detriment to some people's livelihoods that aren't qualified to potentially work in the field.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like Facebook's attack on Apple of them blocking, like mobile advertising is that, it's going to harm small business owners, and they're trying to convince, because that's how the modern web is built, right? Where it's all built on eyes and traffic. And I think what 2020 has maybe taught folks, or it's an opportunity that we don't have to have an internet this way. We don't have to have it so that it's so pervasive and um, intrusive into everything that we're doing, that in order to get customers you have to build these systems that just take all of your data. Like there is an opportunity to build a better and new version of the web.
When I think about where we are in the internet stages and you compare it to the industrial revolution, we just barely laid the railroads and people just started building bridges, right? In my opinion, we're nowhere near the point where, we're fully using the full capabilities of the internet yet, that everybody's doing it. And I think as it's growing, as people adopt it more, as people work, and there's different forms of the internet, blockchain, all that stuff comes out. Again, I come back to the 2020 taught me one thing, which is there's a fuck ton of bad software out there. And I'm not talking bad because it's poorly written. I'm talking bad because it does bad things to people. Monitoring people and how they work. Are you fucking kidding me right now? You're going to GPS track your employees. You're going to look me in the fucking eye as another adult person, and you trust your people so little, you're going to GPS track them and take screenshots of their monitor so you can account for every minute they spend. And I got to wonder, if you're the people that do that, like, what the hell's wrong with you? Right? But that software that exists, that's a bad piece of software. It's bad for humanity and it's bad for everyone else. Like, people aren't scores. Like, everyone wants this productivity score for their employees. And I'm sure if you're some executive of a 30,000 person company, that might matter. But let me tell you, whether you had a 68% productivity score or 90% productivity score, I can point to 400 Fortune 500 companies that are working on exactly the wrong thing right now, right? You're not investing in the future. You're investing in what the future was 10 years ago, right? No matter how productive your people are, if you're working on the wrong fucking thing, you're never going to build anything great. And that's the other thing I saw. How many people up until COVID hit were working on the right thing, Fahad?
Yeah, I have no idea. Probably not many.
Not many, right? You know what's crazy to me? When we started Skipless, you know, many people told me remote work was never going to be a thing. It was just always going to be a fad. And yeah, you know, I called those people when COVID first started and I laughed at them and I hung up the phone. Luckily, we're still friends, but it's funny. It's not a fucking fad. It's here to stay. People are going fully remote, right? And the reason they're going fully remote is that like, you look at it and it's another thing that everyone got wrong. And I think people have to start thinking about digital strategy, especially with the augment of 2020 and the onset of 2021. What are you going to do to what do you have wrong right now that you need to correct in your digital strategy? Not, hey, my ego gets in the way of me admitting I'm wrong. What are you doing wrong today that you need to change? What assumption are you making about the world tomorrow that is wrong, right? And fix it. Change your strategy, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, it's COVID now, but what happens next? War, famine, pick your black swan event. It's going to happen again. And will you be caught with your pants down yet again? I don't know.
That's interesting. So let's put a pin on remote because that's a topic we're going to cover. But just sticking to privacy for a second, and I think we pick on Facebook quite too often. I mean, they're the big dog, right? And it's rightfully so. They deserve it. But there are companies like you're saying that, for example, I know corporations that make employees download like this, mileage app. So when you're driving to a client, they can precisely determine when you left your house, when you got to the client, how much distant that was to the 10th of the mile. But the really crazy thing about it is what these companies are doing is that they want you to have this tracking system on all the time. So they technically know you're going to the store, you're going to the doctor's appointment, and they're like mandating it to employees, like even, you know, checking on what they're doing, like your productivity scores. And I still think that, again, those are the things that are not valuable. And I hope companies wake up to the 2020 should have taught us that we need to work on more important things.
We do. We need to stop focusing. Creative work cannot be measured in the way non-creative work can be, right? If I'm making a widget, I can count the number of widgets you make in an hour. Sure, that's fair. We have quotas. That's okay. But if it's creative work, dude, lines of code, every line of code someone writes is a liability to the company. That's one extra bug that can be created with each line of code. In fact, if I was measuring lines of code, I'm actually being negligent and I should be fired for it because I'm actually asking people to have liabilities to our code base. So in lieu of that, how do you measure productivity? Well, you don't. You have to look at value created. How much value is my team creating? We talked about this on a podcast before. Measure value, not output, right? People can save companies millions of dollars with one line of configuration in 2020. And yet we're so concerned that someone shipped 100 lines of code versus 50 lines of code, and they only typed for 4 hours instead of 2 hours. Like, are they delivering value? Is that value more than what they're being costing the company? And if it's true, then why do you care, right? And people have it completely wrong. But again, it's an assumption that will be tested in 2021. Did you learn from 2020? Or will you continue to lose your best employees to companies and know what motivates people for real, gives that to them, and then outcompetes you? It's really your choice. Like, you can look at it one or two ways, but I'll tell you, without the talent, you ain't doing nothing. Not anymore. And the talent has a lot of power in 2020, and they have a lot more power in 2021.
Yeah, that's it. I love it. And so to continue on what went right, obviously it's privacy, leveraging technology, uh, and also going remote, right? Now it's very acceptable that you see people at home working, kids are running around, which I hope that ends pretty soon here. Kids need to go back to school. But and people are understanding, like, you can actually get things done. However, the counter argument there is, I read something from Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, who said he didn't actually find a benefit for remote work. And so he's going to continue to encourage, as things open up, that people should come back for at least 3 or 4 days, 4 days in the office and 1 remote day. Google's, I think, going to do 3 days probably. They've extended their stay at home till like I think September of next year. And so I think companies are still trying to figure out where that balance lies. But if you're a big corporation like that, can you really? Yeah, I mean, do you have to employ a hybrid approach, or how do you think that's going to work out?
I hope to God they make everyone come back to the office. Do you know how great that's going to be for me when I hire all these excellent people that you have to fire because they moved to Cleveland, Miami, or one of these places they don't have an office? Like, that's going to be so fucking good for Skip List. And I say that out loud. Please make that mistake. Like, you are helping me by giving me access all this time. I know a guy who moved here from California. He works at Netflix remotely. He's staying in Cleveland, right? So if Netflix makes him come back, he'll come work for Skipless, and he's excellent. Everyone knows who this guy is. They follow him. He's a JavaScript expert, right? Like, I don't know what to tell these people, but putting that back into place means you're going to lose a lot of excellent talent to move back to see and live with their families during this COVID crisis. And saying, hey, we need people in the office, great. Limit your talent pool. Have to pay exorbitant amount to get talent to come where you're at, and give me back my competitive advantage I had before the virus. But I don't see why you would do it. You have access, if you go full remote, to all the talent in the world. Now we're all competing on the amount of money you have. And quite frankly, I can't compete with Google and Netflix. They got far more money than I have. So why wouldn't you keep that policy in place? Do you not need talent to build your business? Do you not want the talent to build your business? Like, I don't see the competitive advantage. And Reed Hastings, I'd be willing to go out and say that he had one of the most productive workforces on the planet. So the fact that it wasn't any more productive when they weren't remote doesn't shock me, right? The fact that it wasn't any less productive should shock him, but it probably doesn't. But on the same side, okay, so you have one of the best workforces on the planet, tremendous, and you didn't see any benefit, but tons of people did. And I'm going to believe the tons of people that had the benefit over the one guy who says he didn't, right? And the one guy who I think is an extreme edge case to begin with. And Google, well, Google's well known for making bad decisions, so I'm not shocked. And Facebook said the same thing. So again, these are going to be great employees that become available, come on the market, and we get excellent ability to hire them.
I think the argument there is that like you're missing that like the Zoom basically is like almost point to point, very direct communication, and you miss that like just casual conversations where you can pair with somebody and talk about just something random. And I'm just like, why can't you just start a Zoom meeting and do the same thing?
You can,
So
well, there's Discord, there's tons of areas to do this where you can install this kind of thing. The idea is that serendipity is required to build great products. I don't believe it. I believe that one of the least centralized colonies in the British Empire rose up and kicked the shit out of the strongest military on the planet at the time and the strongest navy with very little help from other countries. And that was the United States of America. And they weren't co-located, but they collaborated very well and beat the shit out of the strongest. So I don't know. I think you look at it, and I think serendipity can't hurt. And if you're trying to stack the deck in your favor, then maybe if you're making the argument you want every possible benefit you can humanly get, but there's downsides to in-person too. How many offices have you been to at startups that have people playing Xbox, foosball table, eating lunch, and just generally not working?
yeah, all the time.
All the time, right? That doesn't happen when you work from home. People are a lot more focused. They do their work and they get off and they're fine, right? There are tons of benefits. You have to get crisper communication between people because you're not in person. You don't get the
You have to
luxury
be a
of,
very good writer.
yep. I mean, these are tons of things. You have to document better. There are advantages to both. The idea that you can't do one or the other because there's benefits, because whatever reason, is false. And I reject the premise that there aren't billion-dollar remote companies and there aren't people that work multinational on teams. There are teams at Amazon that have people in India, in China, in Great Britain, in pick your country, and they're remote. As far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure India is further away from from Seattle than my house to your house. And yet Amazon seems to do pretty well. I don't know. I didn't check their earnings, but I'm pretty sure they're doing just okay. So again, people are working distributed and remote, whether they think they are or not. And I think people need to wake the hell up and realize what's really important and how to optimize for what's really important.
And I think also like the remote for sure had the made the exponential rise of video conferencing, and like Zoom's considered like the hero of the pandemic and the hero of 2020. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings about Zoom. I mean, in one area they help us, it helps us do our job. This is how we communicate. Without it, we'd probably use some other service if Zoom wasn't around. But on the other hand, they're all just a pile. They have a lot of issues. The user experience is not that great. So what do you see next for like video conferencing? Have you seen anything that's interesting? I know Ring Central came out with a new all-in-one application to compete with Zoom and Teams. So I'm saying maybe there's some better experiences there, but what do you see upcoming?
I see that there's a couple things. I'm going to say this, they're not really an incumbent. Teams is getting better every day, right? They really are. And as they get better, as Slack gets bought by, Salesforce, as, Zoom gets shittier, Teams, the convincing argument of Teams is it's there, right? Like it's there. And so eventually they're going to wear you down and you're going to go to Teams. I think that's probably the likely course of action. But I think there are other things coming out. I look at Discord as a potential team collaboration platform. People use it for gaming today, but if they were smart, they create a corporate type system where you could have ad hoc audio and stuff that it's really strong at, mixed with video and things like that. I wouldn't put it past something like a Twitch type platform coming out for professional networks at work. I think that kind of interface where you can talk about people and you can switch and like it's kind of more fun, more gamified. I think could be a competitor, but it doesn't exist yet as far as I know.
What about like the delivery of like really good software? And I mean, I can see so far that they've done a pretty amazing job considering everybody's at home and online. Video seems pretty crisp. I don't see too many delays. I mean, I've had issues with Zoom, but it seems generally working well. Do you see anything from those like standards or like architecture wise that these companies could do something better, or that might, maybe 5G might help? I'm not sure.
So there is, I think, one piece of technology that we were going to talk about that you've been asking me to talk about for a while, and that's cloud game streaming. And I think there's lessons learned from that apply directly to the same model here. So I think there's enough innovation in that space to potentially create disruptive architectures in the space of video conferencing. But I don't know if anyone's really applying that, and I don't think anything's changing. I also think compression codecs get better year over year. I think the web becomes more distributed year over year. So there's a chance that some sort of protocol gets created and works better. But you're still waiting for that magic protocol to get created. And it just hasn't happened yet. Kind of like AirPods, but for video conferencing or switches between devices, and the protocols allow for that. And it's quick and it's fast and it's easy. Almost ubiquitous video streaming. But I don't see anything coming out like that anytime soon. Again, I think.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited about game streaming. I mean, like I have really nice iPads and I can't get all the games, but if I get a device like Luna or Stadia, and now I can play it on any device I want without any hardware considerations, just like basic hardware, that's gonna be just so phenomenal. And you're right. I think that's probably one area that we may not be looking at, is that it's going to spawn another like you said, you could see Discord as something that's could be very interesting later on. Amazon Luna could be a major player a year from now. Things like that that we're not even thinking about maybe.
Well, it's a lot of the problems that games face are architectural problems that solve for video streaming and things like that. The protocols that they use have to be highly optimized. And so they tend to have some of these architectural patterns created well before other industries get them, which was nice, somewhat. So it could be, again, it could be a source of inspiration. I don't know. I think Again, I think Zoom and Slack died from 1,000 different cuts, like just death of 1,000 cuts. It's just bad feature here, good teams feature here, slacking bot. Like there's just eventually what happens is people throw in the towel because they're just tired of it and they switch from fatigue rather than a better alternative. However, I do believe when that fatigue switch happens, a couple years after that, there'll be another disruptive technology that gets built that rips away market share from teams. That'd be my bet on how this goes down.
So let's move into another area that I was going to ask you about. Was we've talked about this before in the podcast, that how I know for some reason in 2020 it came up several times, that how data lakes turned into data swamps. And it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on why that happened. Was it, is it just the design of data lakes that's inevitable? And is data mesh, we've talked about that a lot, is that the future?
So here's the truth of anything. You ever heard of the broken window? It's not the fallacy, broken window problem. Have anyone ever told you this before? Okay. So University of Pittsburgh ran a study a few years ago. Maybe it was Carnegie Mellon. Irrelevant. A university did a study a few years ago. And what they did was they had this pristine building. Okay. And when someone would do something to the pristine building, they would try to fix it because it was pristine. They wanted to leave it as good as it was before. And then they had a rundown building and it had one broken window. Okay. Just one. And when that one broken window happened, people would mess other things up, but they wouldn't fix it because they didn't consider it to be high quality. So eventually that one broken window turned into many broken windows, turned into a very terrible situation. And how that applies to this is anything that happens inside of a monolith, it's particularly because it's a highly coupled system usually, because it's all in one place. When a broken window happens, one little clue, whatever, it spreads. And so as it spreads, you made one little tweak over here, you hard coded something, you end up making a really terrible piece of software. And the more things inside this piece of software, the more chances that you get a broken window, that you make an exception for somebody on quality, that you couple these things for expediency because you need to get it out. And when that happens, the entire thing degrades over time. And because data lakes are monoliths, that happens. And if they fall trap to it now, good discipline, great teams, good processes can stop that broken window from happening. But many organizations don't have a lot of those. And so they get the broken window principle and the entire monolith falls down. And so is data mesh the answer? Not necessarily. It does separate concerns. It produces the amount and chance of a broken window because you separated the monolith into micro data services. Like it is helpful to prevent that, but it has its own organizational complexity to it. It requires a different form of discipline. And so I wouldn't call it perfect. I'll call it an answer to how to fix it. Untangling data lakes is going to basically, how do we turn this jungle swamp into a very nice segmented thing? And I think there's a lot of principles we can take from microservices and apply them to the same thing at how we untangle. We talked about this before, how we untangle monoliths. You can do the same thing to data. And I think that's important. In the meantime, how you fix it is you enforce testing. You add the really great principles that we have in software engineering to data engineering. You write tests, you enforce and assert conditions. You don't allow for broken windows. You fix them immediately when they happen. and you reduce technical debt and you untangle it, and eventually you can fill that swamp and make it great again. It doesn't have to sit there and just be a swamp. You can turn it back into a lake. It's just going to take discipline, skills, and attention to do so.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, large scale systems. And, one of the things I read recently is as Facebook grew, there's this thing where, uh, you know, when you get to about 20,000 users in a network, and anything above that, it's almost becomes uncontrollable. And you're at the mercy of like these algorithms that kind of then decide what's happening, what's going on, what information is available. Do you see any like advances in how we handle like large scale data or any of these like predictive algorithms that could maybe help improve over time as opposed to what's happening right now with like obviously Facebook and platforms like that?
I think that platforms that are like Facebook have a perverse incentive to do what they do. I want you to click more. Therefore, I need to show you things that you need to agree with that you would click. And then when you click them, you agree with it. Therefore, I need to show you more of it. And so what happens is you end up getting funneled into sex of things that you agree with, right? And so if you lean to left before, and so you click on things that have more of a left opinion, you click that and you get funneled eventually into the far left group because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, I know you want to see things on the left, so you click it, and then the next one's a little more left, and then that one's a little more left. And the same thing with the right. First, maybe you clicked on a Fox News thing, say what you will about it, but it's semi-accurate. And then you click on the next one, which is a little bit more right. And then you're soon looking at Breitbart and OAN and all of those places that are extreme right, newspapers and all that stuff. And because of that, because their perverse incentive is that they're selling you advertising and they're selling clicks onto these things, that they need you to click on it. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. How do we prevent that? We go back to what I was talking about earlier. How do we enforce standards, ethics, and knowledge into our field, like the medical field or the legal field, right? And are we ready to do that? And do we want to do that, right? Right now, I think there's such a dearth of talent that people are willing to accept anyone that they think is awesome into doing it. And I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper here, but maybe we do need more education in this field. And whether it comes from universities or somewhere else, I don't know. We've talked to people at some boot camps, and we have a lot of boot campers here at Skipless, and I think they're phenomenal. But continued education is important, and especially being aware of these kind of issues. So I don't know the exact answer to that problem, Fahad, but I think it's just you have to have not put these perverse incentives into platforms. And when there is one, you have to judge whether or not it's okay that this algorithm works this way.
Yeah, I know. I think one thing you're touching on is having high quality data, and these systems return, high quality information. Like YouTube is just, I think, a complete trash. Like, I remember some time back, I was like looking up some recipe, and then 15 minutes later, I'm looking at, real life ghost videos. I don't even know how I
Right,
got there.
dude?
I don't know how
No
I
one
got there, but it
knows.
was scary
No
as
one
hell.
knows. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. The stuff that gets you to click is what they're going to show you. And if that's telling you flat earth theory on YouTube, that's what they do, because then you watch it and they get to the great ads. It's a perverse system that gets created because they need to make money. If we didn't have to make money via ads, life would be better.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that we have an opportunity to make a different type of web and experience for ourselves. I had a few more things for you. Well, so one thing around, COVID, obviously, government was a big part of, a rollout and, every day trying to, help us live our lives better, policies. Do you think COVID has changed anything in the government sector around how they view technology? I know they find it important, but it's still a very slow pace. And I don't know if the full adoption or mindset is around there, but did you see anything around how governments view tech because of 2020?
I think they view tech in a more positive and affirmative light of needing it. Whether or not they accelerate or not, I don't know. Again, we can't talk about form of government on our podcast, but if we opened a government podcast, I'd be glad to debate the finer details of our governmental system and why I think there are some extreme positives to it.
I haven't seen a lot of dramatic changes. I think that was my question there around. Have you seen any big changes?
I don't think so. And I doubt that they're going to change very quickly to begin with. And the reason why is people vote, they're going to do what their constituents want. And I don't think their constituents want more tech.
Yeah. So as a final thought, I was talking to a friend of mine about the vaccine, and he made a comment that like, hey, it's only a few more months and we'll get back to normal. And it's an interesting comment. And I thought to myself, I'm like, do we really want to go back to normal? And if you look at a lot of companies that are out there that are, I think, a lot of people are wanting to go back to normal. But I think this is an opportunity for us to look at, innovation and new things, a new way of doing things. But it's unfortunate that I think in a lot of the areas that we're talking about, government, maybe around privacy, things like companies like Facebook, they won't change. But what would you, as you kind of like look forward, what are some of the dynamics that might be emerging that, people should not necessarily think about going back to normal, but like think about innovation?
Well, we talked about remote. I think that stays in some capacity. I think workplace environment and digital workspace is going to become critical for business going forward. I think that companies need to become more digital to protect their bottom line and have digital products or services that they can offer. And then I think I'd go as far as to say, I think everybody now, the thing that's going to be here is I think everyone now realizes that they're a digital company, whether they thought they were before or not, or whether they knew that they were before or not. I think everyone knows now that we're all digital companies and we all have to do better. And I think this was the wake-up call for that. As far as returning to the old normal, I don't know. I think that I don't know if we ever will or not. I think it'll be somewhat normal for sure. But even when we're all vaccinated, I think there are aspects of this that everyone enjoyed and there's aspects we hated. And I think people are going to keep the aspects they enjoyed of it. And what those are going to be personal. And as business leaders and thought leaders and all of those wonderful words, I think we have to adapt to the individual here, going into 2021. And that means both as business policy, but also our software has become more personalized than ever before, because I think people are going to come out of this more unique and more personable than they ever were before.
Thanks for listening. You can always connect with us at skiplist.com.